I'm Chris Hauck. I've been in marketing research for 33 years now, and I developed an immersive ethnography technique for deep learning or understanding that I think is super cool, and I want to share it with you guys. It's not super cool in the technology, we've invented something completely new, because I really deep down don't think that there's a lot that's been invented that's completely new in marketing research, but I am fascinated by this new way of thinking about ethnography and how to do it. And I actually find this to be a lot of fun. So I thought I would share it with you. I'm kind of an open source environment. So I like to share the things that I invent and hope that other people try them, use them, make suggestions. If you don't like it, let me know it didn't work for you, but I really want to hear if it does or if it doesn't. And love to talk about these things. So if you want to try this in the future, please be my guest. Give me a call or drop me an email or whatever. Okay, so be brave, take risks. Nothing can substitute for experience, right? You just got to try these things in order to make sure that they work for you. Really, the basis of my understanding of this isn't based on my own invention. It's actually something I kind of came up with after reading Creative Confidence, which is a book I highly recommend. Tom Kelly and David Kelly are both brilliant guys, the leaders at IDEO. Really, I came to learn about them the way many of you do. Basically, they had this video about redesigning the shopping cart. And that led me to really having a great appreciation for who these guys are and how creative they are, particularly when it comes to ethnography, really watching people and understanding. And it's really all about empathy, right? Empathy in terms of hearing people and putting yourselves in their place to help understand their attitudes about things, allowing people to be honest and open, and developing real understanding based on their feelings, how they see the world. I think it's very important to have empathy. As a qualitative moderator, absolutely critical. Okay, but I also see qualitative research as this kind of, mad scientist kind of environment where we really, it's a great place to be inventive. So first, let's talk about what qualitative research is. I mean, we're here to talk about qualitative. Let's talk about qualitative. Qualitative research is a variety of research, the common feature of which is a reliance on unstructured data and on forms of data analysis that are non-numerical. So what that tells me essentially is that there are fewer rules associated with qualitative than there are quantitative, which is an incredibly inventive environment for us, right? There's a lot of space here for invention because there aren't a lot of rules associated with it. Now, there are some rules, but generally it's very flexible. As long as you don't introduce a bias towards one answer or another, you can pretty much do it. So having conversations, one-on-one conversations, man on the street style, yeah, that's qualitative research. Talk to random people in a bar, I do this all the time. That's qualitative too, unless you get slapped, and then that's not qualitative at all. But generally, I don't get slapped very often. So not because I'm crazy handsome or something, it's just because I don't do that. But generally talk to people in a bar. You can do that. That's qualitative research too, especially if you're asking questions about what kind of beer they're drinking or why they come into that bar or whatever it is, you can do it. Conduct some focus groups online? Sure, that's qualitative. Or do a focus group of 100 people in an auditorium. It's not the best approach generally, but that's also qualitative. I've actually done focus groups over 2-day periods with the same group of respondents to understand a really complex medical device. So you have to be creative, and qualitative is an incredibly flexible medium in which to do that. Because it's such a flexible medium, it's really a great place to invent new tools and techniques. And I kind of use that term liberally because all the components of what you're about to see have been invented by other people. I just kind of put them together in a way that worked for a particular client once. And I found that over time, it's worked multiple times for different clients. But I always have a really good time with it. and because it's so flexible. Really, in inventing this tool, no statistics are harmed in this process. You know, there are no rules broken in inventing this approach. The first step is to ask the question, what is the objective to be met on this project? And if traditional research tools don't get you there, then it's time to be inventive. Let's come up with a different way of doing it. Then next, after you ask yourself that question, the next step is to determine whether your approach is replicable across projects. Can you do this again? If you can do this again for something completely different, then you definitely invented a new technique. Or maybe you have in your own mind. It's totally okay because there are a few rules associated with this. All right. My favorite one that I've invented in the last few years is something I call deep experience ethnography. Not that it's probably never been done by anybody else, but nobody else that I know of has called it something. So, or described it as a product, or a concept or an invention. And here I am, mad scientist, in my lab coat, coming up with a completely different way of doing something, at least in my own mind. The objective of the study was I had this guy that I met, we became friends, and then he got a job as a research director at a major restaurant chain, and he asked me to help him identify opportunities for improvement and growth at his new major restaurant chain, which I was very excited to do, and I came up with this tool, this way of doing it. We called it the deep experience ethnography, and then the components of which I wanted to do an initial interview up front to kind of set the basis for how people make their thinking prior to going to a restaurant or to going out for a particular event. Now, this restaurant does lunch, they do happy hour, they do dinner, and they do late night, right? So we wanted to look at it at all four perspectives that way. And different groups of people go to these different times too. So we had a lot of people going to happy hour who were work groups, or to lunch who were work groups, right? They have an hour for lunch, and we wanted to take them out to lunch and see what that experience was like. But we started out by talking to them first about how they made those decisions, right? How do you decide where you're going to go? And we had a good talk about that first. So we did interviews at, one of them ended up being at Microsoft, which was kind of interesting on their corporate campus. Another happened to be at a school, another, which I like to call the church ladies, and you'll see a brief clip of these ladies in a few moments where they're in their conference room, that they worked at a Christian college. The variety of different types of people or different types of groups that I got to talk to was infinite. One of my favorite moments was the very first interview. We landed in the first city that we were doing, I think it was Indy, and I ended up holding the family's baby for the entire meal, and asked them questions off the top of my mind as best as I could remember them. But the videographer was there, and he was really busy, and I was there holding the baby. And in the end, we got the whole thing done because I was more than willing to hold the baby and keep that kid happy, bouncing on my knee while asking questions of the parents who were busy with the other 3 or 4 kids. I can't remember how many kids they had total, but it was more than 3. It was more than I have. So I just, being flexible and being willing to experiment is really the basis of coming up with new approaches in marketing research. So really, the tools of my deep immersive ethnography experience are really pretty simple. They're really basic things you can get every day. It's just how to make them work properly is what I depend on my videographer to do. But you can figure it out. It's not extremely complicated. So we use an iPhone as a camera. We use AirPods as the microphone. And then the iWatch is the monitor. So the videographer can actually see what the camera is picking up, not by looking at it constantly and making it obvious that we're recording the session, but by blanking out the screen of the iPhone and watching the whole thing on his watch, which isn't as obtrusive or as obvious to the waiters and waitresses and the seating staff and anybody else who's in the room. It's really brilliant on, my friend Rich is the videographer. It's really brilliant on Rich's part, how he and his team figured out how to surreptitiously collect this data. Really, it's funny because he would just set the phone, anywhere unobtrusive that was pointing out at the group, check it on his watch to make sure he could see everything, and we were off to the races. He had blanked out the screen so nobody could tell what we were looking at. It was really a great approach. Done this in a couple of different ways, or in a couple of different projects. One of them was buying light bulbs back before, right when LEDs were coming out. People were getting very confused as to how to buy a light bulb. We're going to show you an example of, actually the project I'm going to show you an example of is the same client, who are really wonderful people, but we're talking about smart systems for the home. So we've done several projects for this particular client using this particular technique. Then also from a casual dining standpoint, that restaurant example I was telling you about, we'll talk about that and how we kind of, we'll show you an example from that. And one I don't have an example of, really we've done this with lab directors over a 2-day period where I followed them around in the lab and set the iPhone in my pocket so that I could ask them questions. They knew what was going on, but generally stopped paying attention to it after a while. It was pretty surprisingly easy to collect the data that way. Here's, let me give you a couple examples of how this works. Too slow for you.
For me,
you said rock bottom. I think I have one of them.
Yeah, those are like almost every state. But for me, let's say, typically they're from Indy and there's no other place like it.
Well, I mean, they have a good appetizer selection. They always have. I've probably never been disappointed with the appetizer selection, so there's nothing wrong there. I'm not really a salad eater, so.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
None of my favorite restaurants are on this.
Well, I don't have a good name.
I'll say something on the Uber Eats, if you know, or one of these delivery services. If the restaurant can be there and can deliver on the reception.
Sacrifice some of the food for the environment, because if I had the best plate, but it's really dingy or trashy, I'm not comfortable, and I'm like, I'd rather eat it to go, eat in my comfortable house. So I'm a snob when it comes to that. Where Lisa, a coworker of ours, is like, if your husband would order it, I would eat it. Like, she eats like a man. She's mashed potatoes, gravy. So she's all about food, and I pick these little cafes that are girly and lacy and adorable, and I want like a little, I don't care what I get, like half salad, half soup, sandwich, whatever.
As long as it's pretty.
As long as it's pretty, the environment.
Yeah, mine came, I mean, the presentation was great. What did you get? The chicken? It's like a buffalo chicken sandwich, yeah.
Okay, so no pressure or anything, Derek, but I can't wait to see you get
Right.
Well, I'm gonna cut it in half.
Okay.
I would like more lighting in this area, so that's something in the back of my brain when we have the extra money for is get this old lady fixture out of here.
Okay, but it's definitely a remnant from the old lady who used to live here.
Yes,
okay.
And there's another one right here.
Okay.
Still a little mind blown that you don't have to change a bulb in these, and that just the whole fixture. That's different to me, so it's something I have to. It doesn't scare me off. I just need to wrap my mind around it a little bit more. Like, what does that mean? Do I need to compare the price of bulbs and the other fixtures versus this one?
If I hadn't mentioned it, would you even thought of it?
No.
We have Alexa. And we have like the Sonos, which you can now integrate those together. So like we can change the channels and turn the volume up on our TVs and
just by talking to.
Yeah, and we can intercom upstairs, to the kids on their they have dots in their rooms, instead of like having to actually add in an intercom system.
I mean, Philips is like everywhere. After you asked me that question of what other brands are there, it's hard. No, because I think they're maybe they're just the innovator in this type of lighting. You can see it here. They have a display.
I like to say, get in and get your hands dirty, right? Qualitative research is a creative space, and there aren't a lot of rules. Try things, see what works, see what doesn't work. I've found things that don't work plenty of times. This works, but it's just an example of how creative you can be in a qualitative setting. As long as you're not biasing their thinking, you can absolutely do just about anything in order to come to an understanding. I find that this technique works really well, but in some situations it might not. It might do something completely different. I have some basic rules. One of them is that respondents remember better than you think they will. They actually have better brains than we give them credit for. I think the reason I started talking about this is that I end up talking to a lot of people who are big on implicit techniques. And what I found in those sales pitches is that they make the assumption that people can't think. And in reality, people can think about a complex decision-making process much better than you give them credit for. What they don't do very well is, and where implicit really should play, is in that position where we are understanding something that is almost subconscious, right? So a decision of buying your favorite candy bar when you're at the store. Why do you do that? Why did you buy that one and not the other 4 options that were there in that brand, and yet, or the other 50 options that you could have chosen from? Those are things that you might do from an implicit standpoint, but I would suggest to you that people know what their decision-making process was, how they were thinking, and what they thought about. And then the other thing that I think you need to start assuming is that people really want to talk to you. What they've really found over the years is that people really want to teach you. They really want to teach you why they think the way they think, how they do the things they do, what's their thought processes, and they want to bring you along in that. I recently proposed a study for a beauty brand, and it was basically talking about African-American men or Black men's hair. And I said, the funny thing is, I may be a particularly good supplier for this particular project because they're going to teach me. They're going to explain things to me. They're going to take the time to say, hey, Chris, man, dude, look, this is why I do this, or this is why I do that. And I know you can't understand this because you are a white man with no hair, but this is why I do this particular thing, or I do this other thing. They take the time to explain it to me, not because I'm dumb, but because I'm open. I'm open to them explaining it to me. I think that's an absolutely critical component of being a qualitative researcher. So live experiences are just stimulus in this case, in this example, right? Our being there live, doing it is just the stimulus. It's just like being in a focus group and I hand out a whole bunch of sheets of paper that have the concept statement on it. Instead, I'm just taking you over to see it. Okay, in which the subject is also an observer. It's totally okay for the subject to be telling you what they're thinking as you're having the experience. In fact, it's particularly powerful because they're having it in that moment, in real time, and they're sharing that with you as they're having it. It's particularly powerful. It's the real benefit of the ethnography. And that's all I have, folks. Thank you very much for your time today. We'll go on to the next one. We'll go on to Q&A. Thank you very much. And then, next questions.